The one thing I promised him was that I will never write an article putting down people again. I will write and talk about why I believe in being fee only and not taking commissions. I will write about the problem with conflict of interest when it comes to commission taking, but I will not put down people again.
What's up, everyone? David DeSell here, CEO of Model FA and your host of the Model FA podcast. And we have arguably probably one of the most interesting people that we've had on our show here with us today. And before I properly introduce him, I first want to thank the folks over at DFA, Dimensional Fund Advisors, because without them, Dan Allison would not have had the opportunity to meet our guests, and then we would not have had the opportunity to do this podcast. So a big thank you to the folks over at DFA and Dan Allison as well for making this introduction. But we have Christopher Tan joining us today, and Christopher is dialing in all the way from Singapore. So at the time of this recording, it is 7 p.m. my time on the East Coast, and it is about 7 a.m. his time in Singapore. Chris is the CEO of a company called Provident, which is Southeast Asia's first and Singapore's sole fee-only comprehensive wealth advisory firm. So he has been on the cutting edge of this business model over in Southeast Asia. And what I'll give you all a hint about is that it has not been a smooth ride, and it was not well received at first by the rest of the industry over there. But all that said, Christopher, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, David. It's really an honor for me to be on this podcast. I've been to various podcasts, but this is the first time I've been on a podcast from the US. So it is indeed my pleasure and my honor.
Well, I appreciate that. And I think it was, if my notes are correct, I think Jim Parker over at Dimensional in the Australia market had put you on to the Model FA podcast before it was even suggested that you be a guest on the show. Do I have that correct?
Yeah, so Jim Parker has sort of like a website or a blog, and he introduced the good podcast to listen to, right? And I was scrolling through that whole list, and I added every single podcast okay, not every, I would say most of it that he recommended. And then, yes, Model FA came up, and I subscribed to it.
Very nice. Well, as a side note, if you're open to it, maybe introduce me to Jim so I can say thank you for highlighting
I
us.
will, yes,
Please
I will
do.
do that.
Cool.
Yes.
Well, let's dive in. So, Chris, I'm curious. I'm sure you didn't come out of the womb, so to speak, and say, I want to be a financial advisor. So
Mhm.
walk us through kind of your journey from your upbringing and schooling to where you are now. I'll chime in and ask questions along the way, but give us a sense of your journey and background.
Yeah, so I came from a pretty humble background. So my father was a bus driver and my mother was a homemaker, and they had 4 kids. So back then, I wouldn't say that we are very poor, but we ain't rich at all. And I was the second of the 4 children. Um, and then, I graduated actually with a diploma in engineering, in electronics engineering. But I really hated it. I wasn't good at it. But back in those days when you don't have a lot of money, you can't go back to your parents and say, okay, I studied wrongly, I want to change a course, I want to do another program. You don't do that. So basically, after I got my diploma, my parents said, okay, it's time now for you to go out and earn money. And at 19 years old, I was thinking, what's the first thing I can do? And I'm not sure whether you know about this, David, but in Singapore, we have a army by conscription. That means every young man at the age of 18 or 19 years old, we get conscripted to the armed forces. Everyone will have to serve national service. Back in my days, it was 2.5 years at least, and then followed by another 10 to 13 years of reserve service. And so after my diploma, after I graduated, I joined the army. And then I was very fortunate to go into officer cadet school. And after I graduated from officer cadet school, um, I decided that I should be a career army officer for one contract, or at least one contract. One contract back in those days was 6 years. And the reason why I wanted to do that was because that's the fastest and that's the earliest time I can make a living. So as a young second lieutenant, I was making like $1,400 as compared to what a diploma holder will get, about $800. But I knew then that whilst I enjoy the army very much, but I knew then that it wasn't going to be the career for my entire life. And I didn't like engineering. So I signed up the army not just to earn a living, but also to pay for my own university study. So I studied part-time and I did finance in school. So I graduated with a finance degree. And then on the 6th year, I decided that it's time for me to leave the army and I wanted to venture into finance. But that was 1997. It was Asian financial crisis and back in this part of the world. And you practically you cannot find any job in finance. But I was already married, and so I then spent 1.5 years, or to be more precise, 1 year 3 months, with a healthcare company called Johnson and Johnson from the US. I was in the pharmaceutical division of Johnson and Johnson for about 1 year 3 months, as I mentioned, and then subsequently, when the crisis blew over, I decided to join the financial services industry. And in US, I would say the financial planning industry is very much RIA driven. In Australia, is very CPA driven. In this part of the world, is very insurance driven. So if you want to be a so-called a financial planner, in Singapore back then, the 90s, you either join the bank, you join the broker, you join the stockbroking firm, or you join the insurance company. So I joined the insurance company. So I spent 3 years with the insurance company. I was doing pretty well, I would say. Very good income. On the 3rd year of me with Prudential UK, I was making about 200,000 Sing a year. It's not bad. But then, well, I'll just stop here just to say that after spending 3 years with the insurance company, I decided to leave and started my own firm.
Interesting background so far, from electrical engineering all the way to selling insurance with an army stint in between. I'm curious to know, Chris, what were some of the things that you learned when you were in the army that you were
Mhm.
able to take with you and implement into the insurance business?
Yeah, so I think in those years that I was in the army, you can't see me full size now, David, but if you see me, as a real person, you realize I'm actually very small in the size. I'm very petite. I'm very short. Before I went to the army, I mean, nobody actually believed that I will be able to go through the army fine. And not only that, to be able to make it to officer cadet school. And I actually did graduated from officer cadet school as the top cadet in my platoon. That changed my life because before that, I didn't really have confidence in myself. I mean, as a guy, you're young, you're a small size. I wasn't exactly excellent academically. I mean, I'm an average student. So, but when I graduated from officer cadet school, I actually thought to myself, hey, I can actually do something well. And so when I went into the insurance industry, I brought along sort of like that confidence. Also in the army, it taught me a lot of discipline. Um, yes, the army life is very regimental, but it requires a certain level of discipline. When it's time to wake up, you wake up. When it's time to go and do your exercise, your training, you do that. So I brought that into my career. Of course, because I was a officer, it brought it somehow in me there is a certain pride at work, right? And pride meaning to say it's about giving your best. It's about being excellent. And when you produce a certain level or a certain kind of work, you got to ask yourself whether you are proud of what you have produced, right? So I brought those ethics. And like I mentioned before, I was even in Peru. I actually spent 1 year with the pharmaceutical firm of J&J. I was a medical salesperson, right? And I brought that same ethics into medical sales, and I actually did quite well in medical sales before deciding to move on to financial services. So these are some of the things that I've learned in the army that I brought not just to my career, but basically to my life.
And so I'm thinking back to some schooling around electrical engineering,
Electronics
um,
engineer.
uh, and then getting into pharmaceutical sales and then insurance sales.
Yes.
Where along the way did you learn sales or build up sales acumen? Did you attend sales training? Did you read books? Like, how did that come about? Because typically an engineer isn't someone who's naturally inclined to be a salesperson. So how did that occur?
Yeah. So, well, maybe I'm more a salesperson than an engineer, like I said,
Okay,
because
fair.
when I went through engineering school, I tell you, I really hated engineering. I felt it was so boring. But well, thankfully I passed. But I mean, to your question, I never really thought that I was going to be a salesperson. Never really thought about it. Yeah, but it was when I went to Johnson and Johnson, uh, because like I said, I had to take on any job. It was Asian financial crisis. I need to make a living, and so a job was presented to me. I had a chance to do sales, so I did sales, and it was in J&J that I was trained by the product manager on how to do a sale. And I still remember until today. I mean, it's a very simple format. It was called need, feature, benefit, right? First, uncover a need and then describe the feature of your product and summarize your whole presentation with the benefits of using that particular product. And in that case, it was medicine, it was a drug, right? So that was my first foray into sales. But I have to tell you that I worked really, really hard because I was not a natural salesperson. And I have to memorize plenty of script. So I memorized a lot of scripts. And when I went to the doctor's clinic, we typically have to wait about 1 hour before we get to see the doctor because we got to wait for the doctor to clear all the patients before you can enter his office. So I take that 1.5 hours while waiting, going through my script again and again and again and again. And when you go into the doctor's clinic, you really just have about 5 to 7 minutes to finish your pitch. And after that, the doctor will kick you out because he might have to see the next patient, right? So I literally practiced that. We were using a laptop. We have to practice, go in, open the laptop, say everything that you need to say, need, feature, benefit, in 5 to 7 minutes and get out of the office and hopefully get an order from the doctor. So I would say that 1.5 years was really helpful in my training as a salesperson.
Well, it also seems like not only did you practice, but frankly, you didn't have an option because you needed to make money. So whether it was comfortable or uncomfortable to do, it didn't matter. You had to do it to put food on the
Yeah.
table. And oftentimes when your back's against the wall, you tend to rise to the occasion to provide for, yourself and your family, which is
Yeah,
is
yeah,
pretty
yeah, yeah,
interesting.
you're precisely right. Because I was already married, and so that was I was married. That was my second year of my marriage, so I could earn a living. And for those people who are pharmaceutical sales, they will know that you only go and try and see a doctor in the daytime, because doctors don't work at night. If the clinic is open at night, it is not the decision maker, it's not the business owner, it's a locum, right? So you
Mm.
only go and see a doctor in the day. But at that time, I really wanted to hit my target, because when I hit my target, I get a quarterly incentive and all that. And so I think I must have been one of the few pharmaceutical rep that went out in the evening and knock on the doors of the doctor to go and see a doctor. And hopefully, for some of the clinics, I do get to see the business owner. But I learned a lot during that period. Like I said, that, well, if you want something, right, bad enough, you just go out and you do it, and you don't care what people tell you, because people are telling me that no, nobody goes out at night. You are not going to hit the business owner. You are just going to hit a locum who cannot make any decisions. But that was what I did. I did close some of the sales for the night visits, but that was another thing that I took away when I was with Johnson and Johnson.
Love it. Now you're at Prudential selling insurance primarily for 3 years, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right.
Um, what happened after that 3-year period? What transition did you make?
Yeah, so actually, when I joined Prudential, my objective wasn't to do insurance, it was to do financial planning. And in 1998, back in Singapore, the whole idea of financial planning was just starting. Financial Planning Association of Singapore, which is the equivalent of the FPA in the States, it's the Singapore chapter, right? It is also the association that issue the Certified Financial Planner designation. They just started. And I was very interested to go into financial planning because when I was much younger, I wanted to be a doctor, but unfortunately, I'm not academically smart enough to be a doctor, right? But I like the whole idea of a doctor because I felt that, it is one of those few professions whereby you can give a lot of assurance, a lot of certainty to your patients or your clients, right? And I like that. I like to be able to give assurance. I like to be able to hold people's hands when they are lost and all that. And I thought, hey, financial planning seems to be a job that can do that. And so, well, I was recruited into this agency. The manager promised me that, well, you're going to do financial planning. The industry just started. But whilst I did very well in those 3 years, I never really learned a lot about financial planning. Um, on hindsight, when I look back, it was a lot of product selling. I did start
Mhm.
to write a financial plan at the age of in 1999. I learned it on my own through a book that I found in our library. But at the end of the day, I was motivated to close a sale because I don't get paid writing the plan. I get paid when there is a product being transacted. So like I said, I did well. I was top rookie for Prudential, second top rank number 2 in Prudential rookie in when I first joined, and then subsequently I did very well. The money was very good, but I didn't feel that satisfaction. But the trigger really was in the third year. I met one of my bigger clients, and I remember I brought a proposal to him, and and when he saw the product, he closed the file, he pushed the proposal one side, and he looked at me uh, into my eyes, and he said, Chris, this was exactly what he said. I can remember it until today. He said, Chris, I like you, right? And every time when you propose something to me, I will buy from you. But surely there will come a time whereby I don't need any more insurance, right? That was exactly what he said. And I was very guilty because all this while I thought I was helping him. But in truth, he was helping me. He was supporting me. And it made me guilty because I was just selling a product. I wasn't really meeting his needs. So I went back to my partner meaning to say that, was a buddy that I worked with very closely in
Mhm.
the firm. And I went to him and I said, hey, Aaron, his name is Aaron. I said, hey, Aaron, I don't think I can do this anymore. I want to go and do something else. And if I want to leave, I have to leave now. I cannot wait any longer because the longer you stay with the insurance company, the harder it is to leave. It is like I often joke, it is like joining the secret society. You know, it's very easy to join. It's very difficult to get out, right? Because the longer you stay, the recurring commissions become so attractive that
Mhm.
you need a lot of courage to leave, And at that point in time, my recurring commissions was already at 250,000. Meaning to say, if I don't work for the next 3 years, I collect 250,000 from the recurring comms. And so I told Aaron, I said that I think I have to go. And if you are keen, let's go and do something together. And Aaron said yes. So we left the insurance industry in 2001. And of course, those people who were our friends, they were all shocked because uh, we were literally the top producers at that time. And then suddenly we just quit. We just disappeared and we quit and we started doing our own thing.
And did you, before you quit, Chris, did you have a business plan, an idea, a vision, or did you say, let's quit and then figure it out? Like, how did you make that transition?
Yeah, so well, I had sort of like a business plan. By that time, that was 2001. Yes, I was completing my MBA, and I learned how to write a good business plan when I was doing my MBA from the business school. So I actually wrote a business plan. But David, I didn't write a plan to start a fee-only firm at that time. Yeah, actually, our initial plan was to start a firm providing sort of like business succession and business exit planning for the business owners. But along the way, it's a long story, and if I tell this story, it's going to take 2-3 hours to do it. But well, let's just say that along the way, we decided to change the business plan to start a comprehensive wealth advisory firm um, because the Singapore government at that time told us that they are going to put in place the regulations to govern independent financial advisors. Up till then, we didn't have a act to regulate financial advisors. We didn't have. What that means is that if you want to provide financial advice, you can only provide insurance advice and you cannot at the same time provide investment advice because you have only got license to provide insurance advice. If you want to provide investment advice, you can only do that. You cannot at the same time provide insurance advice because the regulations was governing it by product. But the Singapore government at that time said that they're going to put in place an act that with one license, you can advise in different areas. And we thought, hey, wow, that's interesting. So we decided to change the business plan and move into wealth advisory.
And from my understanding, your friends from the industry, other companies, managers, they were all incredibly supportive of your fee on of your fee only venture. And for those who haven't picked up on the joke, I am totally joking. Chris, how are you met with, because as I read your bio, Southeast Asia's first and Singapore's sole fee only comprehensive wealth advisory firm. So my understanding of that is every other financial firm there, they were paid on commissions and selling products. So in you going out and being the first, to a degree, you were exposing them.
Yeah.
So what was that
So
like?
yeah, so I have to tell you that when we first went out in 2001, like I mentioned earlier, the Singapore government said they're going to put in place the act, but they didn't. Why? Because when we finally got our act together and then we rented the office space, and we called it the official start of our firm Provident, it was September 11, 2001.
It was
And
the day.
it was the actual day. It was the exact day. Yeah. So
What?
yeah, so 6 p.m. we signed the office, the rental, the lease for our office, and then we had dinner, Aaron and myself, and then we went back home. We turned on the news, and we saw the two planes crashing into World Trade Center in New York. That was the actual day, and then we like, is that a movie? Oh my, no, that's not a movie. It's real, and so the whole world got triggered. The Singapore government, I don't know why, but even am I speaking now, my hair is standing. Yeah, the Singapore government decided to delay the act because they wanted to focus on security. So it was not until 1 year later that we finally got our license because the act was put in place and then we applied for our license. And then we went out on the news and we said, hey guys, we are now fee only. And it didn't help. And at the time, I was just 31 years old. I was fasty. I was full of fire, and I had a chance to contribute to one of the two national newspaper that we have. It's called the Business Times. And I have a column every month, and I was like slamming commission. I was telling people the problem with commission, and all that, and why I decided to do fee only, and why is it better to do fee only. And the industry got really mad at me. And to be fair to them, they had a reason to be mad at me. Um, because I mean, I was young, and the way I was writing my article, it was as if that everyone that takes a commission, they are evil, they are dishonest, which is untrue, right? I mean, there are many uh, good people they take a commission because the industry was like that. Until today, David, 99% of more than 99% of the advisors today are still taking commissions, right? Yeah, I mean, commission is a structural problem, but I was like slamming everyone and they got really mad at me and people fought back. I was ignored at industry meeting. They complained to my central bank. I think it's your equivalent, your securities commission. That this guy is saying all these things. So I get calls by my regulator and said, "Okay, slow down, slow down. You are writing too much. I think you should be focusing on your business." And then I was like, I was young and I was saying like, but I didn't write anything wrong, right? And then they said, yeah, no, no, you're not writing anything wrong, but you got to slow down, because we are getting a lot of complaints. And I got a letter. I don't know how this person know my address. He sent a letter to my residential address mailbox. I picked it up, and there's this guy who was like threatening me and cursing my son, you know, because I was saying things like, if you're going to buy insurance, don't buy a whole life insurance. The insurance agent makes a lot of money off you, but that's not the correct. You should buy a cheap term insurance and things like that. And then this guy was like, well, wait, I hope that your son get cancer and then you don't have coverage.
Jeez.
uh, yeah, so that was, so for many, many, many years, it was really hard. When I'm there for industry function, no one wants to talk to me. Everybody hated Christopher Tan. Nobody liked Provident. We were asked to publish the first Singapore Master Financial Planning Guide. It was an honor. No one in the industry bought that book. So after one edition, it died. Yeah. So yeah.
How long did it take to transition from that friction? Or let me actually ask a different question. I'm going to fast forward all the way to today so that we can give the listeners some context. Um, what does your business look like today? How many advisors and staff people? How much money do you guys manage? Like, what has the business become since 2001?
Yeah, so it's been a long journey. So when we started in 2001, we started with about 10, and of the 10, probably six partners. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
so six founding members. The rest were just staff. Today we are maybe about 55.
Mm-hmm.
So the six founding partners are still here. One of them is going to retire by the end of the year, but they are still here. We have now about, let me think, 12 client advisors. So we work in diamond teams. So we have
Mm-hmm.
now maybe about, I'll say closer to 7 or 8 associate advisors. So we have the advisory team is the bulk of where the bulk of the people are, so about 20 over people. And then we have got another team called solutions team. The solutions team, they are the R&D people. So they are at the back. They are not client-facing staff. They can see clients where needed, but most times they do research and they develop tools. They develop planning ideas for our advisory team. That's the solutions team. And then we have an investment team. So all our investments are centrally managed, right? And then, of course, and we have a standalone marketing team. The marketing team is quite huge. We have now 5 people in the marketing team. So they do things like podcasts, they produce content, YouTube, website, article, they organize events. So these are the people that generates prospective clients leads for our advisory team. So our advisory team, they don't go out and get leads on their own. And of course, the rest are support staff, important support staff. We have the investment ops that does the trades, the rebalancing of
Mm-hmm.
the investment portfolios, finance function, technology, compliance, and things like that. So right now we have about 55 probably, and we are probably hitting 60 quite soon.
Awesome. And then what
Oh, I
about
forgot to tell you. Yeah, 1.3 billion Sing, which that makes it about 1 billion US AUM.
understood? Okay, cool. So now we know where you are, we know where you started. How long did it take to go from no one's talking to Chris to this is more accepted now, and maybe you're still waiting for that moment to happen. But I guess has it been, was it like a year it took? Was it 10 years it took? Like when did the hate stop?
I'm still waiting. So yeah, so I would say the younger advisors today, uh, maybe because they didn't have that. Okay, so somewhere halfway, I decided that I should stop putting people down.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know whether I should tell you this story, David, but
You should, whatever it
yeah,
is, you should.
yeah. You see, so I'm a Christian, and so one day in church, I had this. My pastor was preaching. Oh, the chosen,
Yes.
chosen one. Yeah. So one day in church, my pastor was preaching, and then, that message was about asking for forgiveness. And that message was about, if you want to be the light for me, you need to go and ask for forgiveness. And the thing that came to me was, I need to go and ask for forgiveness from the industry. I'm like, what? But God, I didn't do anything wrong. And then I was reminded of my bad posture. And then I didn't hear an audible voice, but all these things started playing my mind. Say, okay, even if you think you didn't do anything wrong, go and ask for apology. I'm like, how am I going to ask the industry to forgive me? Right. And then, anyway, cut a whole long story short, I decided to go and look for the association president. And if he's listening to this, he knows that I've gone to look for him. So I went to him, knocked his door, went in, sit down, and he looked at me and said, "So, Chris, what can I do for you?" And I said, "I don't know whether you believe me or not, but my God asked me to come and apologize to you." And he was like taken aback for a few seconds. And then he said, "Oh, okay." I think he didn't really know what to say, but he said, "Okay, it's all right." He was very nice. He said, "It's all right." And then he started saying that, your model is the way to go, but then it's very difficult for us to do it and blah, 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 blah. So we made peace with each other, but that was him and me. The one thing I promised him was that I will never write an article putting down people again. I will write and talk about why I believe in being fee only and not taking commissions. I will write about the problem with conflict of interest when it comes to commission taking, but I will not put down people again. So that was what I promised him. And I never write another article that was like that. So I think the younger advisors in the industry, they weren't exposed to my slamming and all that. So they were okay with me. But I think the older folks, I think they still remember those things that I've written. So I don't think I've been accepted yet. Several years ago, we had a financial planning conference, and they invited someone from the US who were talking about the advantage of being fee only. And I was there. And I was thinking, like, you have one guy in your backyard doing fee only, but I understand why. I don't think that they have accepted us yet. And that's fine. I mean, I've got myself to blame, right? Because, yeah.
Well, when we first spoke, one of the things that you mentioned, which makes way more sense now, when you said that you would go to conferences and people wouldn't want to talk to you and all that. I have a note here that says that you've been going to the US for conferences since the late 90s. That makes way more sense now because you're
Yeah.
like, let me go there because there's a lot more fee only people, a lot more ideas, a lot more people that would probably be interested and intrigued to talk to you. And I mean, you said you're a Christian, and there's a saying also of you can't be a prophet in your own town, so
Yeah.
to speak, and you're trying to do something different in your own town, and you're not being accepted. So do you find, or have you found that when you come over to the US for conferences, that's different than your experience in Singapore?
Yeah. Very different. I am eternally grateful to the advisory industry in the US. Without my trips to the US, without my learning, without people sharing openly in the US, Provident would never have existed. Because if you look at the Provident model, a large part of it was modeled based on how US run the RIA firms. Because in the 90s, I didn't know where to learn all these things. And so I started trying to find out where I can learn. And back in those days, we don't even have the internet in the 90s, right? So I've got to go and ask around. And so I've attended various conferences, FPA conference, Bob Veres, yeah, Insider conference, and all that, all sorts. And whenever I go to the US and I say I am a fee-only firm, and I share the challenges, I think the people in the fee-only industry, they went through that as well in the earlier years. And they understood what I went through, and I was very welcomed. And they shared many, many ideas with me. Yeah, so it's like going back to people who know you.
Hmm.
Yeah, so until today, it's been 20 years. I'm still going to US almost every year. My last visit was just in September.
You're in Texas, right?
Uh, I was in Texas. I was in Austin, Dallas. I was in San Francisco for a while. But every year I enjoy going back, meet the people, learn new things. Yeah, so yes, definitely more accepted in the US.
Very nice. Now, you had mentioned something earlier about how your advisors don't have to go out and find their own leads, and you have a marketing team of 5 people. And if my notes are accurate from our initial interaction, that marketing team, between their efforts and your media exposure, because I think you mentioned on average there's 15 media exposures every single month, that you're generating about 500 leads per
Yeah,
year. Talk
yeah.
to me about that.
Yeah. So since day one, when we started Provident, we asked ourselves what kind of firm that we wanted to be. And I always wanted to run a professional practice like a law firm. And that decision influenced many things, right? So if I want to run a professional practice firm, the kind of advisors that I want to hire, I don't want them to be too salesy, trying to push a product. I want people that are technically competent. I want them to be able to give advice. I want them to have that kind of professional presence. I don't want them to be out there going on the street. This I don't think those things happen in the US, but in Singapore, a lot of financial advisors go on the street to do what they call road shows. They set up booths at the mall and then they try and stop people, and then they try and sell a product on the street.
Wow.
um, Now, not that it's demeaning, it's hard work, but I just don't see a professional doing that. I don't see a lawyer going to the mall and try and tout their wares. So, in my mind, the vision of a professional is they spend time with the clients most of the time. And well, if I'm going to recruit that kind of people, it is quite unlikely these people will be good at prospecting. At least that was my assumption, right? So then where do I get the leads? So I decided that, well, I need to set up a marketing team to be able to get the leads in. So today there are 5 in the marketing team. We have our own studio where we produce our own videos, our podcast. We have a studio manager backslash producer, and then we have an editor that edits all the filming. I've got a person who is responsible for content planning, social media marketing, SEO, SEM. I've got a person that takes care of client experience. We put that under marketing. And then, of course, I got my deputy head of marketing. She has been with me for the last 7 years, 6 to 7 years. She takes care of traditional marketing. And then myself, like you mentioned, I very involved with media. Provident has been very blessed with many, many, many media friends since day one. Perhaps because we are different and the media likes us, and the media wanted to help us to be successful. So today we have about at least 15 unsolicited media requests, whether broadcast or print media. So broadcast, TV, radio. So all these activities that the brand team they do generates. I think this year we're probably gonna end slightly better. So we're probably going to end closer to 600 leads for our client advisors to work on.
That's unbelievable. And how much, just for context, how much content are you putting out? Is it daily? Is it a couple times a week? Like, what's the cadence of content that's hitting all the various channels?
Yeah, so I don't have the exact figure because my head of brand, she does it, but I would say that almost every day you will see something out there on either Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. We have an email newsletter that we send out every Friday. Uh, we have a new podcast every other week.
Hmm.
Yeah, so I would say that on a daily basis for a targeted group. Okay, so because we mainly serve the affluent, so it's not going out everywhere. So it's a very targeted segment. So the targeted segment would likely see something that comes out from us almost every day.
I love it. And are you still, you know, as a CEO of the firm, are you mainly focused on running the business, or are you still client facing as well and having sort of a dual role? Like, what does your day-to-day look like at this stage?
Yeah, so I would say that 80% of my time is spent on running the business. A lot of it is the marketing aspect of the business. 20% of the time, I still see clients. I see clients for two reasons. One, new business. So because of media presence, a lot of times we have people writing in and say, I want to talk to Chris,
Hmm.
right? And I will usually say, okay, I will do the first meeting, right? But then I'll explain to the client and say, but I cannot do your work. Firstly, I'm the CEO. I don't have time, and you really don't want me to be your advisor because I'm no longer as detailed as I wish I could be. Secondly, there's a slight conflict of interest because compliance report to me, and so technically I can do all the wrong things, and then compliance will cover it for me, right? So, but I will explain that our practice is institutionalized. Every client advisor use the same tool, same principle, all that. And after I do the first meeting, I hand it over to my team of client advisors. So the other reason why, or rather, the other reason why I would see a client is legacy. So I do quite a bit of legacy planning for ultra high net worth clients. So we have clients, I mean, the biggest client I've seen for legacy planning, a few $100 million Sing dollars net worth. And they'll come and they are thinking about business succession. They're thinking about passing off their wealth, um, setting up of a trust. So I would do that kind of work. And usually I partner with a younger advisor. So it's a bit of mentoring for them as well. But because these clients are huge, they usually want to see the principal of the of the firm.
Hmm. That makes sense.
Yeah.
How many households? So you mentioned about a billion
Yeah.
in US dollars, but how many households would you say you guys have?
About 900.
900. Cool.
Right. Yeah.
Awesome. It's a lot. It's a lot.
Yeah. Actually, I think as with all firms, over the last 20 years, of course, when we first started the business, we did business with anyone that will want us to do
Right.
work, right? So those clients were smaller, but I will say that the client profile has changed over the last 2 years to 3 years. So today, we are seeing a lot more clients with 3 to 8 million kind of range. So that's sort of like the sweet spot for us.
Hmm.
And we are slowly seeing, not enough, we can do better, but we are seeing more and more of the ultra high net worth that I'll say that comes in with 20 million, 25 million. Yeah, but I would say bread and butter, 3 to 8 million over the last few years. So if you average it out, yeah, I mean, it's not really accurate, but it's probably about 1 million on average per client, but it's skewed by the last few years.
Yeah, certainly. That makes sense. Chris, I'm impressed. This is very, very cool. The journey from identifying, well, first of all, the journey from going into the military and joining the army to realizing you are not cut out to be an engineer, to getting into pharmaceutical sales because frankly there was no other option, to then wanting to do financial planning when financial planning wasn't even a thing at that time, realizing that you were selling insurance for a few years. Rather than kicking and screaming about that, you made the most of that 3 year period and you made great money. And frankly, even though incentives necessarily weren't aligned between you and the client based on what you believe now, you still helped a lot of people at that stage of your life. You then went out on a whim and said, heck, I'm just going to go and create a new industry inside of this industry regardless of what people say. You then get hate mail and phone calls from regulators, and that didn't deter you. You kept pushing forward, and you fast forward 23, almost 24 years, and you have a team of 55 managing over $1 billion and serving 900 households. That's pretty freaking cool.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been a journey, and I'm very grateful to my people, especially the founding members, because in the first 10 years, it was very, very tough. And they were all making good money. They were all from Prudential like me, and they were
Mhm.
all making like a few $100,000 salary, and then they decided to give it up. So it was not me. Of course, I fronted it. So I'm very grateful to my founders. I'm also very grateful to my clients. I've got clients who have stayed with Provident since almost day one, and one of them actually did a podcast, which is going to be out on our podcast, I think, next week. And he's going to retire. And he said that without Provident, he would have never been able to retire, right? Um, so I'm very grateful to the founders. I'm very grateful to my clients. Um, Otherwise, we wouldn't have been able to achieve what we have achieved so far.
That's cool. Well, Chris, we have so much more that we could unpack, but we are coming up here close to time. And one of the things that I want to pivot towards that we ask all of our guests is a book that's had an impact on them. And for those of you listening in, if this is your first time listening to the Model FA podcast, this is our way of distilling a reading list for our listeners. And with the intake form, Chris, you had entered in Good to Great by Jim Collins, which I
Yeah.
love that book as well. But just real quick, what's the impact that that book has had on you, and why'd you make note of that?
Yeah, so it was a tough choice. I wish I could put down a lot more. Yeah, and I was straddling between Jack Trout's Differentiate or Die
hmm
and Good to Great.
That
But I
explains you perfectly. Differentiate or die.
Differentiate or Die. Yeah, that's a great book. So if I could just slip in, and say that's my second favorite book and say Jack Trout's Differentiate or Die. But why Good to Great? Because Good to Great is evidence-based. I mean, for those of us who use dimensional funds, for example, it's evidence-based, and Good to Great is evidence-based because Jim Collins did a lot of research of companies who grow from good to great. What are some of the characteristics? And there are many things to learn from this book, but the one thing I'll share that I really learned a lot from, and that's why I voted this book to be my favorite book, is this thing called the hedgehog concept, right? The hedgehog three circles Venn diagram.
hmm
Right in the middle of that three circle Venn diagram is big, hairy, audacious goal, BHAG. And then Jim Collins said that, he found through the research that companies who are very successful, who can pivot from good to great, who can achieve their big, hairy, audacious goal are companies that has these three things. They are very clear. They know what they are most passionate about. They know what they are good at or they can be good at, and they know what drives the economic engine, right? And that model has been in our corporate strategy planning every year when we do corporate strategy planning. That model has always been there to remind us what we are most passionate about and what we can be good at and what drives our economic engine. And perhaps this is a good way to end the podcast. One of the things that have always driven us is what we are passionate about. Um, we don't look at the wealth advisory business as just a money management business. I have always looked at it as a life, quote unquote, management business because we are not just managing monies. We are actually managing the aspirations, the life dreams, the goals of many families who trust us. Because money is not a goal, money is an enabler of the goal. Money is just means, right? And if we don't do it well, it's such a sacred job. If we don't do it well, and we propose something for the client, the real impact will only happen maybe 15 years, 20 years down the road. And if it's a negative impact in that we do a bad job, many dreams will be shattered, many aspirations cannot be achieved. And it's not just our clients, their families, their children. And I don't know how to look at a client 20 years down the road, eye to eye, and said that I've done a lousy job and I'm sorry. So we looked at the wealth advisory business this way. And because we look at it this way, we ask ourselves what we are most passionate about. And we are most passionate about helping clients first make life decisions before financial decisions, understanding what are their goals and their life dreams, and then aligning the finances to support that life dreams and that life goals. So that's what we are most passionate about. And once that becomes very, very clear, the way we structure the business, the way we advise becomes very, very clear, right? So that's why I like the Jim Collins book, because that hedgehog concept really caused us to think about what should we be focusing on so that we can achieve our big, hairy, audacious goal.
I love that. I abide by the BHAG methodology, and it's cool to hear someone all the way from Singapore use that same acronym that has resonated with me for a number of years. So, with that said, for those of you listening, first of all, I appreciate your time and attention, and I hope we followed through on the promise at the beginning that this was one of the most interesting folks that we've had on our podcast to date over the last 4 years. That said, if you were to Google Christopher Tan Provident, you'll see a lot of information pop up. I would imagine all their social channels. But Chris, if people want to follow along with your journey and what you guys are doing at Provident, what's the main place that you'd like them to check out?
I think the website would be a good place, as you have mentioned. So it's www.provident.com. So Provident spells Providend.com. Of course, we have email newsletter that you can subscribe via, via the website. So that email newsletter basically sends out to you every week on a Friday. It consolidates some of the new articles, new podcasts, new YouTube videos that we put out. Yeah, so I think the website will be a good place to start.
Awesome. Well, Chris, I appreciate your time today. This was wonderful. This was amazing. So thank you so much for joining.
Thank you, David. I mean, it's late, and you are tired. So I really appreciate you doing this to accommodate me, because it's morning for me and I'm fresh, but please have a good rest.
Thank you. Well, I was going to say it's time for me to go to bed and for you to get your second or maybe third cup of coffee. So we're on different wavelengths, but this was a pleasure nonetheless. And for all of you listening in today, again, we appreciate your time and attention, and we'll catch you on the next episode.